So for some reason I was thinking about Mike D'Antoni's legacy as a coach. He's been a part of two of the more significant offenses that we've seen in a long time. Between the build everything around James Harden, step back threes, million pick and rolls, eventually million ISOs thing. And of course the 7-second Suns. And the 7-second Suns are pretty revolutionary. Not to say that they were the only team that ramped up the three-point attempts. I mean, the Sonics shot almost as many threes as the Suns did that year. But it was more just the constant pick and rolls with Nash and Stoudemire, having Marion play power forward, one big guy on the floor a lot of the time, having guys run to the corners rather than just stop on the elbows on fast breaks and things like that. Things that have become staples of today's game. And again, I don't want to give all the credit to D'Antoni and those Suns, because it's not like the idea of playing with only one big was foreign before the Suns showed up, but they just made it a little more normal. And I also think, regardless of how successful the Rockets are with the super small thing, I think teams are going to do that a little bit more now. I think they're going to be like, oh, well, Houston did it, and we're not going to go as far as they did, but we're going to do it a little bit too. And I think D'Antoni should be definitely credited for breaking down certain barriers and not holding on to the past stigmas of basketball too much. The idea of two bigs, post-ups, and slow tempo and all that type of stuff. But of course, another thing with D'Antoni is the playoff success, which has been good. Been to the playoffs a lot of times, won a lot of games, had some exciting teams, pushed some great teams to the brink of elimination, but was never able to really do it. And it's just a part of the D'Antoni story. I mean, no NBA Finals appearances, but he's also had some bad luck with injuries. I mean, of course, there was CP's hamstring injury, and if that doesn't happen, maybe they beat the Warriors. Although, again, I've been consistent with this. If you're going to give the Rockets a healthy CP, you got to give the Warriors a healthy Iguodala, which was a big deal because the Warriors were playing two bigs a lot of that series, and it, gave Houston guys to play off of. But even so, like, a healthy Chris Paul definitely shifts the needle of that series, no doubt about it. Those 7-second Suns, 1 year Stoudemire was out. I believe that was 2006. Yeah, he played 3 games. The Suns managed to beat the Lakers as well as the Clippers in 7 games. Took a lot of trips to the Staples Center. And then they lose to the Mavs, the team that was pretty close to winning the finals. I mean, they were up 2-0 on that Miami team before Dwayne Wade just went nuclear. But they lost Game 6 by 3 points to Miami. They lost Game 5 by 1 point. That was a hell of a Dallas team. And if a couple shots go their way, they win that finals. So to push them to a Game 6 with no Stoudemire, that's pretty impressive stuff, And I feel like we sometimes we kill D'Antoni for never getting over the hump, but it's like he still had some impressive outings, you know what I mean? Now, with all this being said, could you still argue that D'Antoni is sometimes a little too stuck in his ways, where he's got the system in place and he just kind of lets it go, and he isn't as super focused on adjustments in the middle of a tight playoff game? Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, it's tough to remember now, but that was just always a thing. It's like we're just going to do our thing and we're just going to hope it works. And what ends up happening sometimes is in the postseason, when the pressure is higher and guys are faster on defense and you're facing a better team game in and game out, they're just going to have a better way of game planning against you. Or you're just going to get extremely unlucky. Of course, the biggest example is the Game 7 against Golden State. And even then, I'm still back and forth on that game. And do I blame anyone for it? I mean, they had a game plan that got them to that point, so why would you go away from it? And I don't know. But if we focus on the 7-second Suns a little bit more, there was, of course, the infamous the hip check, Boris Diaw, Steve Nash, and all that. It was a 2-2 series. Game 5 in Phoenix, no Stoudemire. Suns lose by 3 points. Phoenix fans will tell you if that doesn't happen, that Suns team goes to the finals and they would have faced the Cavs, so they probably would have won. Because that team, the fact that LeBron got them there was an insane accomplishment. So they probably beat the Cavs, and there you go. But who knows if they really win that game? Who knows if the Spurs don't just force a Game 7? It's impossible to know. But they certainly got a bad break. We all agree on that one. And then you're talking about 2007, where they get washed by the Spurs in the first round. Of course, that was the year they traded for Shaq, and that was weird. I think what happened there was the Suns they got way too scared by everybody saying that you can't win this way, and they decided to go in a different direction. They go with Shaq, and the on-off numbers with Shaq might be good, but looking back on that move, I don't think it was a good move. They've been pretty consistent with this over the years. They should have just went farther in the direction of more threes and all that stuff, and Shaq just kind of set them back, if you ask me. I forgot to mention the first year, the 2005 Suns. They lose to the Spurs in 5 games. To be honest, the team wasn't that loaded, and they didn't have Joe Johnson for a couple of those games, and he was a big part of what they were doing. Now, Sean Marion had a horrifically bad series, so there you go, and we can probably blame D'Antoni for some of that. It is tough to look back on all those series and have an exact opinion on them, but, it's just D'Antoni. Some of it's bad luck, some of it is maybe lack of adjustments or whatever. It just never all came together in the playoffs for him. But I guess if you really want to be defensive of Mike D'Antoni, there is a avenue to do it. You can say, well, in 2006 they didn't have Stoudemire, 2007's hip check, 2008 they stupidly trade for Shaq. But D'Antoni was probably a part of that whole thing, let's be honest. Acquiring Shaq. The year after that they fired D'Antoni, maybe the right move, maybe not, and then Phoenix has their last-ditch effort in 2010 where they managed to push the Lakers to a Game 6. And then after that, we had 4 years with the Knicks. The first roster was not good. It's Zebo and Al Harrington and Jamal Crawford and Nate Robinson. Nobody was going to win with that team. The next year, 29 wins. Once again, roster not great, a little better. David Lee, Wilson Chandler, Gallo, it's starting to resemble an actual NBA team, but even then it's still not good, we can say, I believe. Then they make the trade for Melo, and Stoudemire comes over. They win 42 games, and I still don't think that Knicks team was that great. They gave up a lot of talent to get Melo, and Stoudemire was kind of playing out of his mind. So, I don't know. Are we going to blame D'Antoni for that 2011 Knicks season? Maybe not. He certainly didn't have them significantly overachieve, but I don't know. I feel like looking at that roster, 42 wins was about what you could expect. It was Melo and Stoudemire without much chemistry, and the team changed so much about midway through when they traded for Melo. And then the year after, they win 36 games. That's the Jeremy Lin season, and D'Antoni, when he had Jeremy Lin, he built the entire team around him, and it was what it was, of course. Could you argue that D'Antoni should have done that with Melo? Perhaps. Could Melo have handled it? I don't really know. I guess if D'Antoni was truly a revolutionary, then maybe he would have had Melo do it, but would that have been another case of the Pau Gasol thing, where Melo doesn't want to run pick and roll every single possession? I don't know. Potentially a lost cause, potentially something that should have never been experimented with at all, because Melo was not a natural playmaker. And then D'Antoni was gone, and that was it. And Mike Woodson, to be fair, Mike Woodson was way better for that Knicks team than D'Antoni was, so for what that's worth. But then in 2013, that 54-win Knicks team, they basically played like a D'Antoni team. They shot a crap ton of threes. They played small. It was all that type of stuff. So in a way, it was like the roster that they finally got was built for D'Antoni, but then D'Antoni was no longer there. And we remember that Mike Woodson was basically forced to play that style because of injuries and stuff. So it's kind of interesting to see how it could have gone for D'Antoni in New York. There was the 2 years in LA where he was asking Pau Gasol to do things that Pau was not really good at. I mean, he could do them. Like, Pau could make an open jumper, but you don't want that to be the main thing of his game. I mean, he was more of a roll to the rim post-up guy. And he was so good on post-ups, you could actually, like, do it. And that's even, thinking about the advanced stats and all that. But just having Pau play off of everything else wasn't the right thing to do. And, that Lakers team, it was a very interesting team. And at one point they were below 500, I think, or they were, like, right at it. They were below 500, and then Kobe basically forced that team into the playoffs. I mean, he was essentially like, I'm going to do this even if my leg falls off, and unfortunately that's what basically happened. So D'Antoni definitely deserves criticism for that. I mean, again, you could argue that D'Antoni, on top of the lack of adjustments that he would sometimes make in a big playoff series, it's also the idea of he has his system and you're going to fit within it even if your play style is not really meant for what he wants to do. So yeah, it's such an interesting thing to think about with D'Antoni. It's like the influence that he has had through the Suns and the Rockets and three-point attempts, playing smaller, spreading the floor, pick and roll, give it to one guy a million times, all that stuff. And the way that teams have copied some of that, all of that, whatever. And yet, some questionable moments with the Lakers and Knicks, and overall, no championship success, but even then, injuries in the playoffs. It's very interesting, and I think D'Antoni has gotten perhaps a little bit of a bad rep, where people just are immediately saying he sucked or he's overrated or whatever. I don't think that's the case, but I think it's fair to question. Well, I don't think it's questioning. I think it's pretty much just stating that he's not on the level of Popovich, Phil Jackson, Pat Riley, those types of coaches. He's kind of in that Don Nelson area of smart guy, did a lot of stuff for the game. Overall, I don't know where he ends up on the all-time coaching list. I don't even really know what the all-time coaching list is outside of the top couple dudes. But I think it's interesting to talk about nonetheless.